Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder what actually shapes how far you go in school and in life? Well, this new study looked at childhood experiences all around the world to find some surprising clues. It's a huge project that is looking at what makes people's lives good, and one big part of a good adult life is how much education you get. But most studies about what helps kids do well in school are focused on just a few countries, usually in the West. These researchers wanted to see if what helps kids succeed in education is the same everywhere, or if it changes depending on where you grow up. So, they asked people in 22 different countries about their childhood and what they achieved in school as adults, included over 200,000 adults from all over the planet. They asked them to look back and remember things from their childhood. Things like how they felt about their family, their financial situation, and even if they felt like an outsider. Imagine trying to remember all that from decades ago. The good news is, they had a large number of people participating, which helps make the findings more reliable. They looked at a bunch of different childhood factors. Things like how good their relationship was with their mom and dad, if their parents were married when they were growing up, how their family's money situation was, if they experienced abuse, if they felt like they didn't fit in with their family, how healthy they were as a kid, if they were an immigrant, how often they went to religious services, how old they were when they were asked. And their gender, they wanted to see which of these things, looking back from adulthood, were connected to getting more education. One of the main questions was about how many years of school people completed. They really zeroed in on whether people finished 16 or more years of education. That's basically getting a college degree in many places. They also looked at whether people finished high school as a backup measure. Now, how did they actually do the research? They gathered data from these 22 countries and used a statistical method called meta-analysis. Think of meta-analysis. Think of meta-analysis as combining the results from many different studies to get a bigger, more powerful picture. They did this for each childhood factor they were looking at. Across all the countries, they also used something called E. Values to check how likely it was that some other hidden factor they didn't measure was actually causing the results. This is a way to see if their findings are strong or if they could be explained away by something else. So, what did they find? Drumroll please, the biggest and most consistent predictor of getting 16 or more years of education was how a person felt about their family's financial situation when they were a kid. If their family lived comfortably, they were more likely to get more education. If they found it difficult or very difficult, they were less likely. This was true in almost every country, even though the amount it mattered changed from place to place. Another interesting finding was that going to religious services as a child was linked to more education in most countries. This could be because religious communities offer support and teach certain values that help kids focus on school. However, there were some exceptions, like in Israel, where religious attendance was actually linked to less education, showing how culture really matters. How healthy you felt as a child also played a role. Kids who felt they had excellent or very good health were more likely to get more education. This makes sense because being healthy means you don't miss school as much and can focus better. Feeling like an outsider in your family as a child was linked to lower educational attainment in most countries. This suggests that a sense of belonging is really important for academic success. Parental marital status also mattered. Children whose parents were married were generally more likely to get more education than those whose parents were divorced or single and never married. Childhood abuse was linked to lower educational attainment, but the overall effect was quite small and not very consistent across countries. This suggests that other factors might be more important, or that the impact of abuse depends a lot on the specific country's context. Interestingly, after they looked at all the other factors together, the quality of the relationship with their mother didn't seem to have a significant direct link to getting more education. The same was true for the relationship with their father. Now, gender was a tricky one. In some countries like India or Kenya, girls and women were less likely to get higher education. But in other countries like Sweden or the US, women were more likely. This shows how much national context can change things. Immigration status was also highly mixed. In some countries, immigrants were more likely to get higher education, maybe because of higher aspirations or selective immigration policies. But in other places, they faced more challenges. One of the strongest predictors actually was the year of birth, which is a marker for generational change. Younger cohorts generally had higher educational attainment than older ones. This really highlights how educational opportunities have expanded globally over time, though the youngest group surveyed might not have finished their education yet. The e-value analysis was really important here. It is like a stress test for their findings. It asks, how strong would an unmeasured factor need to be to completely explain away this result? For things like family financial status and religious attendance, the e-values were pretty high, meaning it would take a really strong unmeasured factor to dismiss the findings. This suggests these results are pretty robust. For things like parental relationships, abuse, and immigration, the E-values were lower, meaning there is more room to believe that unmeasured factors might be influencing the results, especially when you look at the average across all countries. However, the researchers pointed out that even if the average E-value is low, the finding might still be very strong and consistent within certain individual countries. Like any study, this one has its limits. One of the biggest is that people were asked to remember their childhood experiences. This is called recall bias, and it means people might not remember perfectly or their current life might color their memories. Also, they used single questions for many of their measures, which might not capture the full complexity of these childhood experiences. And while they looked at many factors, there could still be other things they didn't measure, like genetic influences or the quality of schools that are playing a role. The fact that they use 16 years of education as a benchmark also means different things in different countries. It is a very high bar in some places and a more common achievement in others. This makes comparing those results tricky. So, what does all this mean for us? The strongest message here is that a family's financial situation growing up is a really big deal for educational success. Across the globe, this tells us that policies aimed at reducing poverty and providing financial support to families, especially early on, are super important for improving education outcomes everywhere. The fact that religious service attendance was linked to more education in most places suggests that community involvement and structured activities can be really beneficial for kids. This points to the importance of strong community ties and support systems for children. The finding about feeling like an outsider highlights how much a sense of belonging matters. Interventions that help build family cohesion and a child's sense of being part of something bigger could have real educational benefits. The big differences in how gender and immigration status affected educational attainment show us that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. What works in one country to support girls' education might not work the same way in another. We need policies tailored to each country's unique situation. Overall, this study gives us a fascinating look at how our early years shape our educational journeys. And it shows that while some factors are universally important, like economics, others are much more shaped by where we live. What do you think about these findings? Does your own experience line up with what they found? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science stories. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.